Hi everybody and welcome to the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey and I'm joined as always by Sam Proof. Today we're talking all about video workflows. Do you have a workflow? Does it work for you? And why you might want to think about investing some time and energy into creating one. So that's all coming up today on today's show. Sam, I have a feeling I know the answer to this one already, but how are you going?
I don't even know. Good God. I got here at like the 13th hour. I'm like, just ran in like with minutes to spare on setting up. It's a very busy day, a very busy week. I couldn't even tell you what I've been doing aside from just running around, and my legs are hurting. How are you, John?
My legs are always hurting, funnily enough, but and I must admit, like I've been burning the midnight oil in both directions. I went to bed very late and woke up very, very early this morning. So I'm hoping that, what we say today will be coherent, but just bear with us. And a big hello to the people that are joining us in the chat. Insomnia Doodles is there, and Shrey is on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today we are talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about video workflows. So let's get stuck in. I guess, before we start, I'd really love to know if people in the audience have a video workflow, if they are producing video content. And is that actually working for them, or do they need to resolve it? But I guess before we even get there, Sam, what do you think the benefit of actually having a workflow might be?
Sure. I mean, when you're a creator, you're often wearing several hats, if not every single possible hat. And having something like a workflow is just going to cut down on how many choices you actually have to make going forward, because we're limited. There's studies out there on how many choices you're actually able to do in a day. And this kind of gives you more focus, like, X, Y, and Z things have to happen every video, and here's how we do them. And here's your guidelines on what you're going to do for them, whether it's what are my CTAs, what are my targets, what are the fonts I use, things like that. These are all things you want to have accessible to you, so you don't have to think about it every single time and be like, what was that thing I did last time that was super cool? Yeah, it's all about minimizing the choices that you're making to make things faster and smoother.
And I think a lot of the time people feel like those constraints are actually restricting their creativity. But I kind of think like, if there is an opportunity to make a few, make some fewer decisions, that decision fatigue is a very real thing. So you need to keep that in mind and really think about some of those constraints, because again, like, it really will depend on what you're actually doing. So, and your ability to reproduce that. And again, if you're not obsessed with the, recreating the wheel from scratch, you don't need to philosophically consider the individual format each time, then that can free you up to focus on the content, like the substance of what you're producing. So yeah, I think in terms of, go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, I think it will also help you, especially in terms of like recorded video. It will help you batch record things, because you can just have those templates basically going and be like, this is the part I need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, I'll do all of this setup. I come from traditional film and TV. And when you do that, you don't shoot in order, right? You don't go, all right, this is scene one of the script, we're going to shoot that. No, you find all of the locations, divvy them out, and you shoot everything that happens in the kitchen. You shoot everything that happens on the street, and you shoot it in that, order. So this will help you kind of make similar decisions when it comes to your videos.
And I just want to check in with the chat for a second. So Insomnia Doodles is saying her workflow is more like a work wobble, lol. And Trey is saying that keeping it simple, keeping it consistent helps others recognize you. So one of the other things that Insomnia Doodles sort of said was to define workflow, and I think that's really worthwhile. So I mean, it's literally just the things that you do as part of your processes to create the end product. So today we're going to sort of talk about recording, editing, and sharing, particularly with video content in mind. But again, it really depends on what you're trying to share. And I guess in some ways, like, you don't want to, get too distracted and think, oh, I have a message to share. It could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be an audio book, a podcast, Like, hopefully you have some sort of structure that you know what it'll be. And, we're forever talking about content repurposing here. And obviously, a message is not bound to a single medium. But I think if you've got a particular workflow and a particular, you know where your deliverables are going, and whether that's social media or a video hosting platform or what have you, it really gives you the ability to sort of focus on, the particulars of what's happening. And I guess, in terms of some constraints for video, I think, these things are a good starting point. So the video format. So is it a vertical video for YouTube Shorts or TikTok? Is it horizontal? Is it square? The length of the video is important too, because, some of these platforms, if you're making a YouTube short, for example, you really can't go over 59 seconds or it becomes an entirely different thing. And again, as Sam sort of alluded to there as well, what are the goals for that particular video and what are the calls to action actually look like? Because in a perfect world, you're going to want to have your audience actually do something when they watch your content. Is there anything else you wanted to add there, Sam, or are we right to move on?
Yeah, I think that was perfect. I'm like, hi, CG.
Awesome. And hi, CG. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. That's awesome. Okay, we're gonna come back and talk about actually recording video and some of the things that you might need to keep in mind.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them. Mm-hmm. So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that, of course, is a clip from Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com, which I understand Sam recorded a second episode last week. So that's out and about now if you want to listen to that wherever you get good podcasts, as we like to say.
And you like cats.
Yes, definitely. So it's all about cats and foster kittens and all other things that you need to know over at cuteavalanche.com. So I guess today we're talking about video workflows. This is the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey and I'm joined by Sam Proof. Really, we want to talk about, what does your workflow look like if you have one? If you don't, it might be a great opportunity to think about creating one and maybe refining one. But right now we're going to talk about actually recording. So what are you actually recording? Are you doing on-camera talent, screen capture, video, B-roll footage? How will you know you've got enough? Have you actually planned out your key moments or talking points? And, how are you going to record? Are you recording to your phone or your camera or a webcam? Are you doing it to, storage, or are you doing it straight to your editing projects? And, it's really important to think about how those things come together, when you're actually making sure that you've got all the assets that you need for your projects. So, Sam, I don't actually know, obviously you do a lot of live streaming, but I'm curious in terms of actually recording video for, a video on demand or a VOD, what does that usually look like for you?
So yeah, I do a lot of different things, and have a lot of different self projects, and I work for, freelance clients here and there. So the start of it really comes down to, before even kind of this topic in a lot of ways, is making sure that my media library is organized. So I have a very specific sort of folder structure for every single project. I'm not going to go over every aspect of it, but basically you have your project. Within that, I have about 5 different folders. One of those is media. Inside of that, I have essentially stills or art, and then video media. And then I break it down. And sometimes I might even break that folder down even more to B-roll and capture being things I have shot, B-roll being stock footage you've gotten from somewhere else. And sometimes there'll be other categories within that. But once you have that archive, you can always find that footage easily. So the workflow starts with being organized in every step of the way. And then I have a master sheet that kind of tells me all of the things like the style guide, which I kind of mentioned early on in the show, like what fonts are we going to be using, what calls to actions do we want to establish, and things like that. And if there's a script, I might have bullet points in there too. And then, I break up, ideally, I don't do this as much as I should. Ideally, you break up your week into, this is the day that I do all of the creative, all of the conceiving, writing, and things like that. And you'll do not just one video, every video for the week. If whatever you have on your plate, you're going to sit down with those and get into that space and do all of that. So creating sort of a content calendar, a schedule for yourself, is part of that workflow. And then you pick a day where it's like, or maybe more if you need it, I'm going to do all the shots that are X, Y, and Z. We're going to do all the intros. We're going to do all the call to actions. And then I'm going to have a different setup maybe, and I'm going to do all of the sort of meat of the video and anything like that. And then you have another day. This is the day where I'm going to do what I call the assistant edit work, which is putting it into those folders that I talked about at the beginning of this. So making sure that all of those things go into the right folders. Often I will label those files so that I know these are call to actions, these are hooks, these are intros, these are B-roll, whatever it is, like as much information as you can fit in that small file name that will help you without being not helpful information. Like, I don't need to know it's outside on the street or whatever. That it's just going to fall into the script where it falls. And as the sort of AE day, the prior to actual edit day, I might draft it into the program and make a timeline, and it's just big chunks. And then we'll do another day, and that is the edit day, and it's a finesse. And you go in and you really like trim down those things, those clips, and cut them and add transitions and titles and anything like that. And that's kind of a sample workflow for any project that I'm working on.
And we'll dig into the yeah, sure. And we can dig into the editing side of that in more detail in a moment. I guess
I went too far.
He got excited, everybody. It's okay. It happens. So I guess like in terms of my setup, and again, I've spoken about this before, but one of the things that genuinely changed my mind, and I guess one thing we haven't actually said explicitly yet, is that it kind of almost doesn't matter what your workflow looks like as long as it works for you. So some people will be recording to their phone, some will be recording to web cameras, some will be doing cameras. Some will even be doing live recordings with sort of minimal edit. So that's fine. But I guess the big thing for me is that I don't always feel like I want to record. So anything I can do to reduce the friction up front is really worthwhile. And we've certainly spoken about this before, but I have this, my camera is mounted inside of this teleprompter set up. I've got the lights ready to go. I can sort of click the, a couple of buttons and be ready to either go live or record in a mere matter of moments. But I guess the other thing for me too, as somebody that does a lot of, screen tutorial videos, is that I use a program called TechSmith's Camtasia. And the thing I love about this is it gives you so many different recording options. So if we have a look at this, I've got the ability to capture the screen, capture the camera, capture the audio input, even capture the system input. And the thing that I try to explain to people is that you can do all of this at once, or you can do it separately. So it's one of those great things that, if you find that, maybe you can't address the camera while you're doing the software demonstration, maybe you can take that out. Maybe you can record some narration. And again, that's another thing you can do directly into Camtasia. But it's a great way of thinking, because I think a lot of people think in terms of recording a video, and I like to encourage them to think about assembling a video from different components. Yeah. But again, you really want to make sure that you've got those, you have some sense of where you're going. I don't usually script out things or storyboard as much as I used to, because I have a pretty clear idea in my mind where I want to go. But again, that can be quite a useful thing as well.
Yeah, I think as far as scripting goes, it depends on the person and the project, of course. Like I used to do the weird news, and that was very specific and had like very intentional, like comedic things happening. So it had to be really fast. And, you know, every other sentence had to be a joke, if not more. So we definitely leaned into scripting things. But like something like this, I think, where we're comfortable with the subject matter, and it is live. So like you just want kind of broad strokes and bullet points to go off of if you're doing anything.
Absolutely. And I just want to check in with the chat. So Nathan Volt, thanks for joining us. Oh Snap, a John Lacey /Samproof Friday stream. It's actually Saturday morning here in Australia in the future,
Sure,
but yes, the joy of time zones. And hello to Walter Strong III from the Huddle. Great to see you there. And Nathan's also saying pro setup.
That was your teleprompter.
Yes, yeah. And again, like that, you know, it's funny. I talk about that from time to time. That definitely is an investment. It wasn't like it was hundreds of dollars, shall we say. But again, it's always there. And until I actually invested in this, I had so many tabletop tripods and I would have to adjust them every single time I had to do anything. Even just for a video call in my day job, it was a nightmare. And I guess the other thing that may not be super obvious from that photo, which I'll put it back on the screen for a second, is that this is actually mounted onto the Elgato key lights, and there are a couple of strong arm mounts, and one of them is on the teleprompter itself, and the other one is actually on the monitor that's the camera essentially. So yeah, and again, like, you know, you don't necessarily need to run out and spend that kind of money if you're not interested in doing that or not ready to do that. But again, it's really, really important to think about what's going to work for you. And I see people with mobile kits, and mobile kits are great. Like, you can travel, you can do things out in the wild. But again, if I had to unpack this and set it up every single time, I would never get around to recording anything ever. So,
and I mean,
again, that's something to keep in mind.
And that is definitely a part of the workflow. Like, you know, when I was doing the aforementioned weird news, that was like a definitive amount of time setting things up, because I would always have to tear it back down and do it week to week. So that's why I needed to have a kind of workflow where I had the ability to batch record multiple episodes at one time, because I'm like, this is a 2-hour setup and a 1-hour breakdown. It's not worth it for me to do that on a daily basis. So I need to be able to shoot a week worth of material in one go.
And I guess if you are in a situation where you're going on location, you're using other people's talents and their time, you really need to make sure your gear is set up well, because and it's funny, I think I saw somebody on Twitter, I can't remember who, I won't guess the name, but they'd been paid by a brand to go and talk to people. They got home and none of the microphones worked at all. Oh, no. So, which would have been absolutely devastating. So, yeah, again, especially when you do have, wireless mics, make sure they're charged. But also, take some time to, and again, it comes back to that point about friction. Make sure that you actually review your footage and listen to it while you're still dressed up and, in front of the lights and potentially maybe even have makeup on. Make sure that you've got what you think you've got, and maybe even if you are doing a scripted thing, to do a number of different takes so you can sort of, especially like the example that you gave in terms of comedy is great, because you really need to make sure you've got that timing right, you've got that inflection right, and just really hit the points.
Yeah, and literally that is the way that I would run those with the weird news. Is we would have a very specific, and that was a very specific intro that was like the fastest thing that had the most punches in it. So I would do that one bit, which is maybe 3 sentences, 4 or 5 times in a row, just over and over again, just to hopefully get it in one take, essentially, even though in 5 takes. And then, you take your time with the other stuff, and you can kind of self-evaluate what the errors are. But yeah, if you're trying to batch record stuff, give yourself options.
Absolutely. And I know it's not technically video, but my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, is a scripted show for the most part. And the thing that I learned very, very quickly was it's much better to take a moment and just repeat the entire line or phrase, rather than try to splice it together and just go from the word that you tripped up on. It's not worth it in the end. Like, it is so much easier if you can actually just redo that phrase again. And I think we've spoken about it a little bit on the show, but like there's no punishment really for being more prepared and practicing more your communication skills. So that's something I'd really encourage you to think about. And like don't be afraid. I know it can be sort of frustrating at times when you've done the 15th take and you're like, I'm not there, but I'm kind of just over it. And I think at that point, maybe you do need to sort of walk away for a little bit and just chill out. But yeah. So that's another great way of thinking about that. And we're going to talk about some editing workflows in just a second. But speaking of my podcast,
when we wrote the LinkedIn branding book, Michelle Griffin and I, when we wrote that together, we started with mindset. And in that, we came up with almost 28 fears of why people don't want to put themselves out there. And that fear is really real for people and holds them back in so many ways. And introverts and extroverts, and it doesn't matter whether you're a CEO or back at the beginning, it's been really interesting. And we started with it because we figured if you can't get in that right mindset, the rest of it doesn't happen. And, people were like, mindset, branding, how do those two things go together? Well, if you don't have the right mindset, you won't put yourself out there. You won't create content. You won't send someone a direct message. You won't comment. There were so many stepping stones that came after it. And so it's probably the most popular chapter in the whole book that people always comment on. They always can see themselves in some of those fears, and we've all got them. I still have them. I'm worried that people are judging me just like everybody else. But at the same time, like we just said, that whole cliche, as our friends in the US will say, it's all about, why am I doing this? And I have to just keep coming back to, what does it look and feel like for the person on the other side when they have that light bulb moment? Like, that's what I'm doing this stuff for. And if I can keep focused on that, the rest of it will sort itself out. But for others, when you're still trying to figure out what is that thing, it becomes around, what are people thinking and what are they going to judge me and what are they going to say about whatever I post? And honestly, no one cares. For as much content as I put out there, I'd be crazy to think that actually, people care about it as much as what I do. They just don't pay that much attention.
And that's a clip from my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle. You can learn more about that over at johnlacey.com. I've actually got 15 episodes, and this week's episode was all about how much I hate AI. So that's something that Sam and I argue about quite a lot. So if you want to hear my point of view on that one, you can check that out over there.
That's funny because I'm literally conceiving an article of 15 things you can do with your live stream with AI. Shout out to Todd over on Livespace. How you doing?
Thanks for joining us. Okay, so this is the video and live streaming show. We're talking all about video workflows. So how can you actually think about your video projects maybe in a little bit more of a systemized fashion and just get a little bit better at sort of building those projects out and maybe freeing you up to actually focus on the content and maybe your presentation or your delivery. So we've spoken a little bit about why a workflow might be desirable and also some of the things you might want to consider in terms of actually recording, but let's talk about editing. And I guess the first thing I want to say about editing, and again, it's that same point I made earlier, it doesn't matter what your workflow looks like as long as it works for you. But number one is really know your software deeply. And, there's probably all kinds of shortcuts. There are probably all different ways of doing things within the particular software that you use. And I'll talk about the software that I use in a moment. But again, it's really worthwhile to actually invest some serious time in learning those things. And I guess my bonus tip, if you like, is that, if you wanted to, if you can't remember all those keyboard shortcuts, it's a great opportunity to actually put those on a Stream Deck. And again, I think Sam and I are both instinctively reaching for our Stream Decks. We're not sponsored, but there you go.
But we should be.
We should be. That would be delightful. But yes, so like that's the thing. Like I love keyboard shortcuts, and certainly there are certain ones like cutting a clip that are incredibly useful. So it's a good idea to memorize those to the extent you're able to. But again, if there are a lot of them, if you can't remember them, having a physical button is just a really, really nice way of working as well.
Yeah, it also kind of lets you incorporate multiple hands, whereas, instead of just sitting there with the mouse being like, and then I go over here and this and that, and it just doubles your speed at least.
And I know like certain video editors actually have specific sort of external devices to speed up that workflow. I've seen people do things with gaming mice where they've got extra buttons and they just set up the functions for that as well. That's probably getting a little bit hardcore, but again, depending on how much editing you do, that might be worthwhile. I guess the other thing too is that it's really important to, you know, we've spoken about templates recently, CapCut templates specifically, but they can be fun, they can be useful, but I kind of want to encourage people to think about creating their own template. So again, you know, those things that Sam alluded to earlier, if you have particular fonts and colors and logos and graphics and transitions, you know, think about actually organizing them into a clip. And, you know, you might have the call to action there. So if you build out so much of that and you can just replace the, you know, the actual person speaking or, you know, the bits that are in between that can really speed you up. And again, I think it's quite useful in terms of, you know, that visual branding, that people will see certain parts of your videos and recognize them as relating to you and your brand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have the same fonts, the same colors, everything's always constantly in the same sort of positioning, then yeah, it makes you more recognizable. And it takes people, I think the studies where it's like 10 times to see someone before they start to like click, like, okay, I've seen this person, I know who they are. And I think I would add on top of like the concept of making a template for your editing project, to even if there are things you can do in shooting your video to speed it up. So for example, I did a series last year for Halloween of I'm going to say it and it's going to turn, let me mute this, of Halloween based Alexa tips. And I shot the entire thing in OBS in the vertical plugin, which we talk about all the time. And everything was already up there. I branded it. I had, you know, tip number 12, Halloween tip number 12 from Alexa, things you never knew. And I just simply had a button on my Stream Deck that would up that counter to the next number. So I could just roll through them all one after another. And I didn't have to worry about that aspect of the template because it was already done, like set up all the same. Every single one's going to look perfectly identical and just have different, you know, takes, different tips. So you can do things like that prior to even getting into the edit. That being said, I also recorded a clean version of that as I was recording, which is a nice thing you can do in OBS with the ISO plugin or source record.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that actually, because on last week's show, obviously we went live, but I did something that I don't normally do, and I actually recorded my my camera to the camera's SD card, and in some ways that was glorious because I had no embellishments on the top of anything. Like it's just a raw recording. The problem I did have though was an hour's worth of footage at 60 frames per second was like 20 gigabytes, which my poor hard drive just is struggling to deal with. But again, like if you can record, you know, multiple angles, I guess the other thing too that sort of sparked in my brain when you said that was that even just having a camera, and whether it's a webcam or a phone or whatever, just having it on a like a tripod.
Yes.
And that way, and if you're not moving around too much, you can make these cuts pretty seamlessly and people won't necessarily notice that you're jumping around, unless you are kind of going for that jump cut aesthetic, which was very popular, you know, back on YouTube back in the day. So again, it's just sort of thinking about how you're going to use that and I feel like I mention this every week, but just in case it's not obvious, just in case somebody's new here, like I'm just in front of a green screen 24/7. So the great thing about having that footage as its own thing was that I could go into my editing software, I could remove the backgrounds, I could crop things out, and I've got this project in Camtasia. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've got an image of this in here. Let me just put it on the screen. So I did want to talk about Camtasia. Again, it doesn't really matter too much what you're using as long as it works for you. And, you know, CapCut is a great thing that we recommend because it is free and it's easy to get used to. The thing about Camtasia is it's really geared towards recording your screen and it captures the video, the metadata. So, even the path of the cursor, and you can do all kinds of weird and wonderful things here. One of my favorite features about this software, though, is that it has its own inbuilt library feature. So if you see, there's sort of a column that says library on the left of the screen, and I've got images, I've got video, I've got even audio. You can't see that on the screen. You have to scroll up a little bit, but I've got all these things put in this place, and I can just drag and drop them onto the timeline whenever I need them. But the other nice thing about this, and this is literally last week's show, I've sort of edited a whole bunch of things together, but I can actually take an area of my my project, and I can right click and I can say add selection to library. And that's actually how I sort of take my longer form, because that's an hour-long show, but I can sort of very easily cut that up into clips for YouTube Shorts and TikTok and Reels and that kind of thing. So again, it's worth exploring if your software actually has these kinds of features, because they can be really, really helpful. But even in terms of just organizing your assets, like, we cannot overstate how important this is. And you need to know where they are so you can find them again really, really quickly when you need them. And like, the thing I try to tell people is, if you've ever taken a photo of anything that's relevant to your work, make sure you keep it somewhere. So, if we were to mention the cam link, I could show you a picture of the box in my editing software, because I know I took one a million years ago. That stuff is really, really useful.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, but I definitely talked earlier about my sort of folder archive, and that is kind of per project, but having what John's talking about, which is more of a global media library of things that you regularly refer back to, things that you use, like maybe you have an intro or an outro that you use in multiple projects. You don't want to be putting copying and pasting that into every single project folder, taking up needless amounts of space. You have in one global sort of area that you can grab, or as John said, like screenshots and shots of products that you talk about multiple times, you would have in its own sort of dedicated place. So that's also good to think about before you start really committing to projects.
And I guess even if your software doesn't actually have templating capabilities built into it, just save a new version of the project and recycle it. At least that way you're not starting from scratch. So just want to check in with the chat. Hello to Garen Belaney from Micro Studio. When it's time to go, grab that Micro Studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Nathan asked me a question about visiting Uluru. I've not been. I haven't had that opportunity, no. But thank you for the question. So today on the video and live streaming show, we're talking all about video workflows. So, it's all about improving the efficiency, getting things done, making sure that you're freeing yourself up by embracing some constraints. And that way you can sort of think about the content itself and not get too bogged down in the particulars of the format. So, I think I guess, we need to talk about the fact that Sam does edit in CapCut. And I must admit, I do a little bit in CapCut. I often use CapCut for burnt on captions is the main thing that I use it for. But it's a great option. It is literally free, which is nice. I know they try to upsell you in different ways. A
little bit.
But talk to us about how you use CapCut, Sam.
Sure. I honestly feel like in this particular topic, CapCut fails a little bit. Like, it does not sort of have that global project ability. It's, there's no real custom made templates. They have their own templates, but those are really just memes. And when it comes to having some kind of style guide or anything like that, your best bet is to create sort of a project and copy and duplicate those projects and go from there. Like if you have intro, outro that you constantly use and things like that. But beyond that, what CapCut does do is make the editing process pretty seamless and fast and easy. And it's not like it's a dumbed down project. It does some complicated things like motion tracking and green screen and stuff like that, auto generating captions, as John said. So it is, I think, a good way to get into editing if you have no experience. The UI is pretty self-explanatory and easy to follow. But if I were to really be like, I need to commit to some really complicated batches of videos that I need to cut, I would probably opt to return to Adobe Premiere, which does give you more of a global library kind of feel. And definitively project templates and stuff like that, to the point where, God, you can have like all of your like fonts and all that pre-styled and things like that. But yeah, I like CapCut, and I'm not going to say anything super bad about it, because I do use it constantly, almost daily at this point. And the beauty is that you can be doing it on mobile and browser and desktop. So that in itself could present to you different aspects of your own workflow, where it's like, I'm going to be shooting on my phone X, Y, and Z days, and then I can just automatically drop them into a CapCut project, cloud share it to myself, and on my actual edit day, boom, it's there, I'm ready to go. And now I can commit to it without having to have done like all of the sort of AE or assistant editor work. Like I already did that post-shoot day, So I think that's a great thing to take into account for your potential editing workflow.
Absolutely. And I guess the other option, and again, I know some people have some concerns about ByteDance, the company behind CapCut and TikTok, and that's a whole other discussion.
Look, they only asked for my credit card and social security maybe 3 times. No, just kidding. Kidding.
But anyway, I guess the other sort of free option in that space that we often hear about is DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is an amazing program. It does have a much more higher learning curve, steeper learning curve than CapCut. But it does color grading. Like it really is professional software. So again, depending on who you are and what you're doing, that may or may not be the right choice for you, but it's great to check it out. I guess the other thing, and we have done an entire show on CapCut in the past, so you can check that out in the archives. But I know one of the things that Sam showed us was that in the settings of CapCut, they've actually got different sort of keyboard shortcuts based on other popular editing software. So if you have come from a different program, you can sort of you switch that setting and work with those keyboard shortcuts. So, and again, like honestly, if there are things that you use all the time, if you've got a Stream Deck, it's such a beautiful option. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But this is the video and live streaming show. I don't know if Insomnia Doodles is still around. Hopefully she's lurking somewhere. She sort of mentioned something. It has nothing to do with the show, but I'm really fascinated about working with VR. And you guys look super cool in a floating window, by the way.
Oh, no.
I'd love to hear more about that. But anyway.
Discord.
She is here. Okay, cool. So let me know more about that. I'm really fascinated. But I guess, getting back to the subject at hand, let's talk about actually sharing your video content. So, I think the first thing I would encourage people to think about is, where is your video actually going to live? Like, what is the destination for the video? So whether it's social media or YouTube or Vimeo, like where is it actually going to live? Because knowing that will introduce its own constraints. So, if it's TikTok, we know it probably can't be longer than 10 minutes. And again, probably should be a lot shorter than that anyway. Yeah. But, there are certain things that your destination will sort of suggest for the workflow itself. But I guess the other thing too is it's really important to realize that your video project is much more than just the exported video file. And we're talking about things like thumbnails and captioning resources and titles and descriptions and chapter markers and hashtags. So I guess, again, like in the spirit of having that content library, if you spend any time on any of those things, make sure you put them with your video project somewhere that, if you decide to share that video somewhere else, they're all ready to go. You don't have to think about, how you're going to introduce that content to a new audience, and just make sure that's all there. We talk about captioning a little bit, and its accessibility is kind of a big deal in my world. So if you are using something like CapCut or, one of these AI supported tools, make sure you do actually check the content for accuracy, because there's nothing worse than, a video going out and suggesting you said something that you didn't say. And sometimes those things are hilarious, and sometimes those things are career ending. Right. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. If you want to, There's a guy out there, I forget which TikToker it is, and other people will probably do this as well, but he intentionally does put mistakes in. He doesn't leave mistakes in, but he will intentionally do stupid mistakes so that people in the comments do in fact point it out to him. But it's never something like, oh, I accidentally said something about this group of people. Boy, was my face red. No, or like the caption accidentally said something horrible, but it's a minute, like, I've got a gallon of laundry detergent in my refrigerator kind of thing, but as a caption, whatever it is. He also does that exact thing. So yes, if you're going to make mistakes, make them intentional is my point.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I see that's probably the starting point for a larger conversation about engagement. And
yes,
it's funny. I hear Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting say, be the most talked about podcast. And I think the easiest way of doing that is just to be the most unhinged person on the planet. And I don't know that that's necessarily what I want to do.
But that's not what I want to do.
No. So anyway, I guess, Sam, are there any things that you think we should think about in terms of actually sharing the content? We'll talk about promoting it in a second,
Sure.
but I guess even before we get there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you hit most of these things, but, I talked about having a master sheet earlier on so that you have sort of a dedicated place where you can reference, not just the style and the font, which I said for, different parts of this, but it would be used here as well, where you have, these are every single platform that I want to share this to, some sample title, mechanics that you might use, like top X tips about blah, 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 or, whatever those sort of title techniques that you use are, you want some of those there. And then hashtag groups, for example, with Cute Avalanche, obviously it's cat based. So we have a general sort of, these are cat-based hashtags. Here's 10 tags. Or we have like Whisker Wednesday. We have Catterday has their own tags. So I can just be like, whoa, what were those 10 tags? I can just grab them, right? I'm actually going to take it one step further for my Mac friends. And I'm sure there's an easy way to do this on PC, but this works on the Mac and then transfers to your phone. You can go into your keyboard shortcuts and create like I forget what they actually call it, but it's like a text replace, so that I can go in and write cat G1 for cat group 1, and it will replace it with those 10 hashtags no matter where I'm writing it. So I don't even have to go back to my master sheet. I can just access it from my phone or my Mac. And you can, I'm sure, make macros through auto hotkeys on PC or whatever else. So having little tips and tricks like that to make things faster. When you do share, you're going to have, probably on like your YouTube, you're going to have blocks of text that you always put into your video descriptions, which you should have, that explain who you are and some other things that help maybe nudge to the SEO of what you're talking about. And again, you can do that sort of thing with a text replacement, but you can also use Stream Elements Mercury, which is specific to YouTube, which will let you put a consistent block of text on every single video on your YouTube channel. So if you want to replace that thing in one place, you don't have to go into 1,000 different YouTube videos. You can just replace it on Mercury and it will update everything else. So that's a quick little tip for that.
Wow.
And yeah, and once you've, done all your posting or uploads, you want to share it to all of your social media. So you need to have a list of like, here are the different social media places that I'm going to be going to, and what that might look like. And, figure out your main hub. Like there's a multitude of shorts, video platforms and VOD video platforms, and pick one. Find the one that all of your tweets and threads and Mastodon posts point back to. Don't try. I don't think you should try to be like, okay, on Mondays I point to my YouTube, on Tuesdays I point everyone to Vimeo. Just unless you're someone who's already out there with 200 million followers, focus on one destination.
And it's funny because this is literally a conversation we've had, since the beginning of this show, because I appreciate that it's a good idea to really choose your focal points and prioritize those. But a part of me is just like, if I've got content, I'm going to copy and paste that and just share it everywhere and just see what happens.
Well,
Although
no,
I guess
so
for
this
me
is-
personally,
Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, you're going to upload to all of those sites. Like, I'll take that same short to TikTok and YouTube and Instagram Reels and Facebook and Clapper and Lemonade and wherever else shows up next month. I will post that same short video. But when I go to Twitter and Threads and other places, I am only going to point to the YouTube video.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's fair. Like, you want to make people aware of, you know, where your home on the internet is. And, you know, I guess at this point in time, I'm going to press a button on here just to... So if you do want to check out our websites, which are a great place to be, you can head over to johnlacey.com or soundproof.tv. We've been playing with QR codes lately, so they'll be everywhere for the foreseeable future, but just bear with us. So I guess, you know, Sam, we've spoken about the sharing aspect, like when it comes to actually promoting and sending people towards the videos, or, you know, maybe even from the videos to other resources. How do you think we should think about that?
Nathan wrote something and I kind of spaced out for that. Do you want to rephrase that?
No worries. So I guess, you know, once the video is live on our destination, like, how do you recommend that we make people aware of it?
Yeah, no, just walk away. You're done. You're just gonna leave it up to the algorithm. And no, like I was saying, yeah, you're gonna craft some social media attention. I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, right? You've got an endless amount of time and resources, and you can do all of these things. You can post on every single social media site every day until the next thing comes out. And then while you're promoting the thing you just did, you're going to start promoting the thing that's coming up with behind the scenes and whatnot. And at the same time, you can take out Facebook ads. You can go on your live stream and reference the talking points of whatever the video is and be like, go to that video and, you know, check it out. You only have so much time in the day. You only have so much money you can put into this, which most of us, I'm assuming, is zero. So you have to pick and choose. But yeah, you want to put it out to as many places as possible. And then after a few weeks, study your analytics and see what places consistently actually draw traffic to my video, and then pull back on those other ones, double down on the ones that work, save some time, and try new things.
Absolutely. I guess, you know, and it's not really so much for video on demand or edited video, but certainly in terms of the promotion of this show. Like, I create the events on a Tuesday in my time zone. On Wednesday, I've got a newsletter on LinkedIn. And again, I use that as an excuse to sort of talk about the things that we're talking about this week. So it's a good idea to think about what are those opportunities on different platforms, and really how you can keep showing the same sort of, you know, putting the same video in front of people, but maybe highlighting a different aspect about it. You know, because some of these things are very large topics, and, you know, maybe you approach it from a different angle. Maybe you point out something that might have been incidental in the context of the video itself. You know, all different, and I've done an entire show. I think it was one that I was solo on, actually, which is rare for this show, but talking about social media promotion opportunities. You know, there are reels, there are stories, there are tweets and threads and all of the things. So again, I think in some ways, for me especially, I can get really self-conscious about sharing things, and, you know, you feel like you put it out there and everyone knows about it, but that's not the way social media works. Right. Like, those algorithms are much more fickle than that. And I this is kind of the point at which I think social media scheduling tools are really awesome, because you could just go and say, I've got a podcast this week. I'm going to post it at, you know, 2 a.m. on Wednesday, and, you know, at 10:30 a.m. on, you know, just schedule them out. And I guess, you know, talking about bringing different aspects forward in the promotion of the content, like for my audio podcast, I will promote it as a standalone piece of content, basically the blog and the video and stuff on my website. And that'll be the first place I push them to, but then I'll be like, hey, have you listened to this on Spotify? Have you listened to this on Apple Podcasts? Like, just finding a slightly different tack to work with, just to surface it again. And I guess the other thing too is, if your content is evergreen, if it is perennial, just show people again, because there are people in your audience that weren't with you 3 months ago when you released that. And if it's still potentially useful for them, it's a really good idea to surface that again. On YouTube specifically, we've got the community features, which is really, really awesome. You might even want to think about maybe switching up the thumbnail at some point, or, changing the title and seeing if that maybe helps find a new audience or an extended audience. There are all kinds of things you can try. But again, I guess, we're talking about workflow today. So, if there are some repeatable things that you can just sort of work into your week, whatever that looks like, that can be really, really useful.
Yeah. And I would say that one of the biggest things, we'll go with one of the biggest things, to promote a video is not directly promoting the video at all, but being a part of other people's communities that are in your niche, and just being an intelligent and active voice there. You're not there to promote, you're just there to lend to whatever conversation this other person in your community is having. And eventually people will take note of you and be like, all right, let me go check out what they're doing. And, it's not spammy, right? You don't want to go in and be like, oh, what is this, technology news? Guess what I do every Friday,
I think, again, that's the thing. You don't go on Twitter or Threads and say, listen to my podcast, although that is essentially the goal. What you do is you say, I've been thinking about XYZ, and this is what I think of it, and this is why I think it's dumb. Again, I've got the AI example on the brain, so forgive me for that. But, you want to bring people into your world. You want to bring them into the content. Again, I guess making them aware of the thing that actually exists and that it is an option, and then sort of guiding them towards that is really, really useful as well.
Yeah, it's share knowledge and add value while promoting. So it's like, hey, here's a tidbit on this, and if you want to know more, Friday.
Absolutely. And I guess that's the other thing. Like, we talk about the nature of social media is that it is quite ephemeral, and sometimes, like, I post almost every day on LinkedIn, and that content doesn't get a lot of engagement. It really doesn't. And but I'm just looking for an excuse to maybe be top of mind for somebody, even if they're just scrolling past, even if they don't click play, even if they're not paying that much attention. Like, just sort of being there in the background, I think can be quite a useful thing as well. So, whatever you can do. And again, think about the scheduling opportunities in each social media platform. And then, if you're interested, you can explore third-party tools. I've mentioned this a few times, but I bought something called Promo Republic on AppSumo like years and years and years ago, and I never ever use it. But they recently added the ability to schedule TikTok videos, and I'm like, I've really got to double down and invest in that that vertical format content. So that is something on my to-do list. I've got to make sure we have a look at that at some point. But yeah,
that's an interesting feature, because it is very hard to schedule things on TikTok. They do have the ability through the browser-based version of TikTok, but it only allows you to schedule up to 2 weeks in advance, which is not enough weeks.
Yeah. And again, like, especially for that, and I don't really know what it looks like on TikTok, but, we know on YouTube that the shorts have a relatively short lifespan. And at that point, it's like, can you make them unlisted? Can you re-upload them? Is there an opportunity to resurface that? And especially on YouTube, because they've made some changes recently, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but just indulge me. They've made some changes recently because they were concerned about people scamming with terrible links. So now they do actually give you the opportunity to link from a vertical video to a longer form horizontal video. So I think that's an amazing opportunity that is worth exploring. Okay, I just want to I'm not sufficiently nerdy to appreciate all of this, but I just wanted to acknowledge the fact Insomnia Doodles has got a new computer and it's completely spec'd up, 32 gigabyte of RAM, which is really nice, i7 processor. A part of me has been wanting to spend like $10,000 on a new computer, and I'm trying to see if I can actually justify it or not. So I'm definitely thinking about it though. All right, so this is the video and live streaming show. Today we've been talking all about video workflows and how you can think about maybe, developing one, refining one. Again, I think we want to focus on the fact that it's really important that whatever it looks like, it works for you and you can repeat it and maybe even outsource it to somebody else at some point. Like if you are the on-camera talent, and you want to produce more content, maybe you want to, outsource that to an editor to do that. And once you've got a process in place, that can be really, really useful and effective. Okay, Sam, so where can people learn more about you and find your content and watch the videos and all that good stuff?
Sure, yeah, you can find me at samproof.tv, not samproof.com. That's a long story, but all of my social links are up at the top right under my name there. For the most part, you'll find me over on twitch.tv/samproof, but all of the time, you'll find me hanging out with cats at cuteavalanche.com. So you can go to either of those websites and scan either of those QR codes. Oh, I didn't even know that switch. Nice. Good moves. Yeah. How about you, John?
And if you want to catch up with anything I'm doing, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I've got a whole bunch of articles about live streaming and videos and OBS and all that good stuff over there. There are social media links at the bottom of that page. So you can check out that over there. I guess the other thing too is we do want to hear from you. So if there are particular things that you're interested in hearing about, that you'd like us to discuss in future shows, let us know. Wherever you happen to be watching this, we'd love that kind of feedback. But again, thank you to everybody that's been live in the chat today. There's been a lot going on. It's really awesome to have your company today. We really appreciate it. So, Sam, do you have any sort of final thoughts, or do we just wish people a happy weekend and we'll talk to them again next week?
Yeah, I think we covered everything. It was such a hectic day with this. Yeah, I would caution people to avoid too much planning. So I've given you all of these things, but there is a point where you're like, okay, Sam told me to make a master sheet for all of my projects, and now I have 32 different ideas. So I have 32 different master sheets. Try and rein it in and find one sort of guideline that you carry over to everything. And then if you need to make some nips and tucks, that's it,
And, Sam really speaks from experience. If you've never seen a Sam-proof spreadsheet, you haven't lived. There is so much going on there. And he actually has one for his short clips. It's insane. Oh, yeah. We have looked at it on a previous show, so I'm not really sure which one that is off the top of my head. But yes, I guess the only other thing I would say before we wrap up today is that video takes up a lot of space. So yes, that's kind of the bane of my existence at the moment, is that my hard drive is very full and I probably need a new hard drive rather than a brand new computer, but I'm maybe using that as an excuse. But I guess really, if you spend any time recording anything, make sure you back it up somewhere. Think about getting some storage options. I invested in some network storage on a NAS system, and I've never, ever regretted that. And it's funny, just last week, I was like, why is my hard drive always full? And I moved my personal music collection from my computer to the network storage and saved over 200 gigabytes worth of space. It was just insane. So I guess that's the thing. In terms of my workflow now, if I'm actively working on something, it lives on my computer. And that is sort of a quirk of Camtasia. It won't work with video files unless they're physically on the system you're editing on. It just does not play nicely if I were to put that there. But the minute I'm done with it, I move that stuff off the computer and just go from there. So again, think about the constraints that exist in your world and some of the things that you want to do, and have a great weekend. We'll be back roughly the same time next week. So keep an eye out for those invites, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, and if there's anything you want us to talk about in future episodes, let us know quick. Before the stream's over.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.